Harlem, 1935. Latino Lino Rivera stole a penknife from a local store. After arguing and fighting with the store owners, the police were called to the scene. To avoid the huge crowds and attention, the police decided to escort Rivera through the back entrance of the store. When someone saw Rivera with the officer, she claimed that the officer was taking Lino into the basement to beat him. People then started making accusations and the riot started. Groups organized by the Young Communist League and a black group called the Young Liberators mounted a demonstration that drew thousands of people. When a white member of the Young Communist League was introduced and stood up to speak, an object was thrown through the window of the store, and the police responded by arresting the speaker and attempting to disperse the crowd. The crowd reorganized across the street, and another speaker tried to address the group from a lamppost perch. The police arrested him as well on a charge of unlawful assemblance. The crowds began to gather in greater numbers along 125th Street and soon spread to other areas in Harlem. As the sun set, the looting and window smashing began. Police attempted to stop the crowds by circulating photographs of Rivera alive, but this just fueled more anger. The riot ended the next day when New York Governor Herbert Lehman announced to the Harlem people that the situation was under control. 3 African Americans were killed and nearly 60 were injured. 75 people, mostly blacks, were arrested by the police. The riot caused over $200 million in property damage. The long-term causes of the riot included high levels of racism, police brutality, and social inequality. Watts Riot, 1965. The incident started on August 11, 1965, when Marquette Fry, a young African-American motorist, was pulled over and arrested by Lee W. Meniscus, a white California highway patrolman, for suspicion of driving while intoxicated. It was later confirmed that Fry had been drinking and was driving with his younger brother Ronald in the car. While Marquette was being arrested, Ronald retrieved their mother from her house. When Mrs. Fry saw her son being forcibly arrested, she fought with the arresting officers, tearing one of the officers' shirt. An officer then struck Marquette's head with his nightstick, and all 3 of the Frys were arrested. That started mass chaos and outbursts of police brutality in the society. For several days, rioters overturned and burned automobiles and looted and damaged grocery stores, liquor stores, department stores, and pawn shops. Over the course of the 6-day riot, over 14,000 California National Guard troops were mobilized in South Los Angeles, and a curfew zone encompassing over 45 miles was established in an attempt to restore public order. The riot took over the lives of 34 people, resulted in more than 1,000 reported injuries, and almost 4,000 arrests before order was restored on August 17. Throughout the crisis, public officials advanced the argument that the riot was the work outside agitators. Also, hundreds of buildings burned to the ground. All the major stores and vendors that were on 103rd Street have been completely burned out. There have been an estimated $40 million in property damage in Watts. Some long-term causes were inadequate schooling, high unemployment and poverty rates, and low medical care. Also, there had been dissatisfaction and a bad relationship with the residents of Watts and the police. There was also discrimination in getting home loans for African Americans.
Detroit, 1967. The catalyst of the Detroit riot was a police raid at a drinking club. It was a welcome home party for 2 returning veterans of the Vietnam War. The police arrested all attending patrons. Local residents who were watching protested, and several of them had their property vandalized. An empty bottle was thrown into the rear window of a police car, and then a wastebasket was thrown down the storefront window. Police officers were injured from stones and bottles being thrown at them. When firemen responded to fire alarms, they also were struck by thrown objects. Jerome Kavanagh, the mayor, agreed with city and state leaders at police headquarters that additional force was needed to stop the violence, so 360 police officers assembled at the Detroit Armory. 800 state police officers and 8,000 National Guardsmen were ordered to the city by Michigan Governor George Romney. They were augmented by 4,700 paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne Division, ordered in by President Lyndon B. Johnson. The looting and arson began to end, but use of sniper fire was continued. The attack stopped with the violence 3 days later. 43 people were killed, 1,189 were injured, and 7,200 plus people were arrested. About 2,500 stores were looted, and total property damage was about $32 million. Long-term causes were segregated housing and schools and rising black unemployment. In 1967, the unemployment rate was about 17%. After snipers fired at firemen and fire hoses were cut, Governor Romney had President Lyndon B. Johnson to send in U.S. troops. Los Angeles, 1992. On March 3, 1991, Rodney King was severely beaten by the police when he was caught speeding at 110 miles per hour. The event sparked outrage and a national debate about police brutality. 4 Los Angeles police officers were caught beating an unarmed black motorist in an amateur video. Rioters in South Central Los Angeles blocked freeway traffic and beat motorists, wrecked and looted downtown stores and buildings, and started 100-plus fires. Korean shop owners in African-American neighborhoods defended their businesses with rifles. On May 1st, President George H.W. Bush ordered military troops and riot-trained federal officers to Los Angeles. By the end of the next day, the riot had stopped. 55 people were killed, almost 2,000 were injured, 7,000 were arrested. The riot also caused $1 billion in property damage.
St. Petersburg, 1996. On October 25, 1996, 2 policemen shot African-American suspected drug dealer Tyrone Lewis. Dozens of angry residents pelted authorities with rocks, bottles, and bricks. The next day, St. Petersburg Mayor David Fisher declared a state of emergency in St. Petersburg, Florida, and placed a temporary ban on the sale of firearms and gasoline in containers, and also met with local community leaders to try to defuse the situation. Florida Governor Lawton Chiles sent 200 National Guardsmen to St. Petersburg, where they were placed on standby. The Clinton administration announced that the Justice Department would conduct an independent investigation into the shooting, and the U.S. Civil Rights Commission was invited in to calm the situation. Riots broke out again after the trial, saying the police officer hadn't violated any laws. 5 other young black men had already been shot by St. Petersburg police officers that year, and many people were tired of it. The justice system did not handle the situation properly by saying there had been no offenses. Ferguson, Missouri, 2014. On August 9, 2014, African-American Michael Brown was deemed suspicious and was shot multiple times by white officer Darren Wilson. The shooting of Michael Brown led to a lot of destruction in Ferguson. Places were destroyed and people were outraged at the actions of Officer Wilson. Many people found the shooting to be based off of prejudices. When the case was taken to court, Wilson was found not guilty, which angered many people. Over 80 people were arrested and 25 buildings in Ferguson were burned. The whole issue sparked national attention through social media. Movements such as Black Lives Matter took hold of the situation as they were angry at the racial inequality that is still prevalent today. Part of the issue was the racist justice system. The police in Ferguson were known to be racist, so the police department made some large changes, such as changing the head of the police. In 1868, the 14th Amendment was added to the Constitution, which granted citizenship to all persons born or naturalized in the United States, which included former slaves and recently freed slaves. In the 1960s, civil rights actions led to many changes in laws and ways in the United States, including employment opportunities, better voting rights, and banned segregation. Over time, there's been many changes, but there's still racial inequality in the United States. The riots up till today have not changed the ultimate goal, which is to delete racial inequality overall in the United States.